job will cost you some friends, right? You chose to go in this, I didn't, right? And if you didn't know, fellows, you're here now. But the very nature of your job is to begin to work as revolutionaries. You know, revolutionaries are those who go against the existing current. The current right now says that increasingly African American females are being incarcerated. The current right now is saying that African American Latino students are not increasing their higher educational attainment level across the board. The current right now is saying that we will have mass shootings monthly. Your job is not just to talk about the current, but to serve as revolutionaries and swim upstream and begin to change the dynamics. So if you think about it, as social workers, you have not done your job yet. Because social work is just the vehicle. Social justice is your destination. And I might ask you, what mile marker are you at in your journey? Your job, your title as a social worker is just the vehicle. Your destination is social justice. The training that you provide, you're not teaching young people to be just social workers. You're teaching them the skills, giving them the tools that they need to create social justice. That's the task at hand. That's why I say programs are progress, but policy is power. If you don't believe me, look at our incarceration rate across the country. If you ever look at the data relative to incarceration rates and look at them through the 60s and 70s, they're pretty consistent. But then if you look at the early 80s, there's a 45-degree, 90-degree spike in the incarceration rate specifically for African American Latino males. Now looking at the data, one might say that there was a conference like this one where they pulled together a lot of African American males and Latino males, and they said, we are going to commit more crimes, we're going to get caught, and we're going to jail. Break, let's do it. But that's not what happened. What happened was in the early 80s, in the Reagan administration, they changed the policy as it relates to incarceration for nonviolent drug offenses, caused a 90-degree spike. During the Clinton-Gingrich administration, they doubled down on that, and that changed it. So we can't come up with just a program. We're not going to program our way out of this. We've got to create the policies and practices with a force that's equal enough to change what has been put in place. So the programs, that's progress. But the macro matters, right? The macro matters. It's a no-brainer. And you all, while there are those who want to sell you the program, they say, well, I'll give you a few dollars to set up the program. It's your job in your profession to say, no, we've got to change the systems. We've got to change the systems. And I'm not negotiating on that point because I'm glad that you all are here because you all are it. Some of you all may say, well, what's it? Well, if you are a Trekkie, you're the Starship Enterprise. If you follow Star Wars, you're the Jedis. If you're a Christian, you all are the disciples. If you follow metaphysics, you all are the chakras. If you follow the universe, you all are the stars. If you follow hip-hop, you are the clique that can go 0 to 100 real quick. Some of you still don't get it. You are what King is to civil rights, what Chavez is to the labor movement, what Mahalia Jackson is to gospel music, what Serena is to tennis, what Jay-Z is to hip-hop, what iPad is to music, what Batman is to Robin, what peanut butter is to jelly, what red beans is to rice. You're it. Look at your neighbor and say, I'm the it. You're the it. whether you recognize it or not. So since you're it, we've got to be clear about knowing what your job is and doing your job. Number one. Number two, you have to be okay within your job playing your role. Playing your role. Now, I know that it's difficult because sometimes we see someone else's role and it looks much more attractive. And we believe that we can play our role and their role. And sometimes we wish our role was their role and their role was our role. And playing your role sometimes will mean, as I've said, that there will be some people that just don't like you anymore. Playing your role will mean that you might have to spend a few extra hours in the office, a few extra hours in the community. It may mean that you might have to spend time with people who, by the very nature of spending time with them, takes a couple years off your life. And if you don't know anybody like that, you're the person. Playing your role means there are some spaces that you have to walk in where others are running from. Couple of weeks ago, I was in New Orleans, and I had an opportunity to sit down with Trayvon Martin's mother. And after everything that she had experienced, all of the pain she had experienced, she talked about spending days on the floor in her bedroom. A real physical pain. Pain that, admittedly so, she said most people would never feel. And then she talked about the morning, the day that she got up. And she said, I got up because I recognized that God gave me the strength to answer my call. And many of us have to recognize that there is a calling that we have been given that is specifically for us, that if we don't answer, the universe is not as strong because of our failure to answer that calling. What's for you is for you. It may not mean that your name is going to be in the lights. It may not mean that you get the attention or you get the position, but it's your calling. It may mean that you may have to spend some extra time understanding a generation that we just don't understand sometimes. Because the social work, the construction of healthy living and learning communities is different than it was 10 or 15 years ago. You know, some of us were born during a time when there were only 32 channels on the television. Some of you all was fewer than that, but I won't point you out. Some of you all remember when the television would come on, then at 12 midnight, the Star Spangled Banner would come on, and the whole television would go off. This generation that we're dealing with has over 800 stations. And if they're not getting the information there, they're getting it from the internet. And if they're not getting it there, they're getting it from their cell phones. They're processing more information in a day than many of us had to process in a month. And for us to step in their world and say, well, in my day, if you could only do this, it doesn't fit. So it takes understanding and giving some value to a generation that we don't totally understand so that we can connect. How many of you all know that you can't help people that you can't reach? Right? I remember when I was in junior high, and it was long before Harvard, long before law school, and I was cutting up in literature class. And my teacher kicked me out. Not once, twice. And I was walking down the hall one day, and I was rapping. I said, I've been in this game for years. It's made me an animal. There's rules to this stuff. I wrote me a manual, a step-by-step booklet. And he said, come here. He said, if you can remember that, you can remember that no man is an island entire of himself, but every man is a piece of a continent, a part of the main. Thus any man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. Therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. And later he explained to me that that was a meaningful experience for him. Why? Because he recognized that there was a body of content that I knew, that I was learning. See, in most cases, the question is not, can this child learn? The question is, how and what are they learning? But he recognized that there was a body of content knowledge that I had that he needed to understand a little bit better so that he could draw a bridge between that content and the content that he was trying to give me. How many of you all know that someone said that learning doesn't occur until the teacher learns something from the pupil? And in order to do our work in communities across the country, we have to learn from the people who are in those communities. It's not about taking our own prescriptions and going into communities and saying, here, we're going to fix you. But we've got to learn what's happening in the communities and work and begin to embrace and build bridges. It takes extra work. It means more time. But it's a part of the calling and accepting the role, whatever it may be. How many of you have heard of a man named Bayard Rustin? How many of you heard of the 1963 March on Washington? All right, we got a bridge. So, Bayard Rustin actually organized the March on Washington. And if you ever look at the stock footage of Dr. King's speech, and you look beyond Dr. King, you will see an unassuming African-American gentleman, Bayard Rustin, who organized it. And I was looking at a journalist who interviewed Bayard Rustin about the March on Washington. And he asked him what was the most important part of the march, thinking he would say it was Dr. King's speech, Mahalia Jackson's song, Roy Wilkins' speech. He said those were important. He said, but equally important were those individuals who said that they would make 500 signs and showed up with 500 signs. Those individuals who said that they would make 1,000 sandwiches and showed up with 1,000 sandwiches. Those individuals who said that they would be on the corner of 3rd and F at 4 o'clock, and were actually on the corner of 3rd and F at 4 o'clock. And this was long before you could text, are you there yet? A level of execution. But equally important, he said, were those individuals who stayed after to sweep the streets so that we wouldn't get fined. And I think Dr. King said it best. He said, if it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted, like Shakespeare wrote poetry, like Raphael carved marble. Do it so well that the host of heaven and earth will say, there lived a great street sweeper who swept his or her job well. That's a part of answering our calling. You know, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, so I'm a Bulls fan. I'm a Cubs fan. Bulls fan, I understand, you know, if you don't have 6 rings, it's sort of hard to hear. But I remember listening to a journalist talk to Michael Jordan and asking a similar question, asking him, what was the best team you ever played on? Thinking he would say it was the year he won MVP, they won the championship. He said, what was the best team you ever played for? And he said, you know, the best team I ever played for had someone on the team that everyone else thought shouldn't be on the team. Someone that everyone thought was a misfit and that we should not have recruited this person on the team because we were already good. He said that person was Dennis Rodman. And he said, now Dennis has its problems, and he still does. He said, but I knew that there was some excellence in Dennis. There was something he could do that others could not do. He said, I knew that if I took a shot and I missed, that he would be right there to rebound to give me another shot. He said, I knew that if I took another shot and I missed, he would be right there to rebound and give me another shot. And he said, I knew that the more shots that I took, the more I would make. Listen, we don't need a generation to be critical of this generation. We need those who are willing to rebound for this generation. Think about it. But for a teacher, but for a parent, but for a pastor, rebounding for you, you wouldn't be here. So how do we? You all are rebounders. You construct the social web that is necessary to catch a generation on a host of issues where the country and others are saying it's too expensive to build that net. It's too expensive. It takes too long. It's not worth it. They're not worth it. In education, we see this each and every day, and we've been talking more and more at the Schott Foundation about what if we gave every student a personal opportunity plan that outlines the additional academic, socio-emotional, and health supports that they need. Academic, whether it's additional tutoring, ELL support, year-round learning. Socio-emotional, there's clear data that indicates having a mentor actually helps. And I think it's good that people mentor on a volunteer basis, but if we know that it actually works and it's necessary for a significant group of students, then it should be a part of the main budget, paid for out of state and city coffers, right? Y'all slow on that one, huh? I know, I get it. I know some people are saying, well, how are we going to pay for this? Our state is strapped, coming out of recession. But you pay for probationary officers in that budget. And through that process, it often leads our students to go to places that it costs more to keep them there. So it seems to me that social workers would propose an opportunity budget, that we invest on the front end so that we can have mentors, so that we would reduce the number of beds on the back end, and there would be some cost savings, right? But it takes those who are willing to present the proposals to address the challenges of today. So we got to be willing to know your job. You got to be willing to answer your call. And lastly, you've got to be willing to do something that a little boy had to teach his father. Father was reading the little boy a bedtime story. And he finished the story and kissed his son on the head. And as he began to walk out, his son said, "Daddy, can you bring me a glass of water?" Father said, "Son, you had all day to get water. Finish the story. It's bedtime. I'm not getting you water before you go to bed. Good night, son." Father gets back up, begins to walk out. Here's his son again. "Daddy, can you bring me a glass of water?" Father, a little upset. He said, "Son, I'm a little upset. I just explained to you I'm not giving you water before you go to bed. I'm a little perturbed. If I have to come back in here, I'm going to have to come back in here to spank you. Good night, son." Father gets back up, walks out, closes the door. Here's his son. "Daddy, when you come back in here to spank me, can you bring me a glass of water?" It's going to take a level of persistence if we're willing to do this job. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to take a level of persistence. How do I know? Because when I was in 4th grade, long before Harvard, long before the University of Illinois, 4th grade, I'd been acting up at school again, and they wanted to kick me out. And it took a woman who came up to the school who wasn't a social worker. She didn't have a PhD. She wasn't a CEO, but she was just my grandmother. And she went up to the school and she said, "You will not kick them out, but you will educate them. You will not kick them out, but you would educate it." And I thought that I should be kicked out. I looked at my own record. She said, "Stand back, son. You will not kick them out, but you would educate it." And I thank God that, and I thought she was foolish, but I thank God that she was foolish enough to believe that I could learn. We don't need individuals with just CEOs or presidents or PhDs, but we need individuals who are foolish enough to believe that all students should have a chance, that we can create the type of social structure, the type of social policies to give all students a chance. So the only question that remains is the rhetorical question that Shakespeare spoke through the mouth of Hamlet. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it's nobler for our children to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous misfortunes, or for us to put up arms against a sea of troubles and through direct opposition end them. To be or not to be, that is the question. And social workers, the answer is in your hands. God bless you all.
Thank you. Wow. So that's what I'm talking about. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. It's the launch of what is, I'm sure, going to be a fabulous conference. Enjoy it. There's lots of opportunities for connection and learning, and you've set us on a really good path for all of that, and I thank you. So we're going to now leave to join our reception, which is, I understand, in the other building. So it's in the Plaza building. I know, I'm a little dizzy trying to figure out how to get from one place to the other, but I'm sure we can figure this out. So it's in the Plaza building in the exhibit hall, and I will see you over there. Thank you.